All right. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at in this world. I'm very excited to have Seth here. And we're just going to go slow and talk about some different topics that are really near and dear to Seth's heart and my own. And so, first, I'm going to let Seth do an introduction of himself, and then we'll get started.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Um, so I'm Seth Kopald. I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm a level 3 IFS practitioner, certified. I do a lot of training for new people who are getting trained in IFS, and I've been a teacher most of my life. I have a master's in education, and I've also have a PhD in organization management with a specialization in leadership. And even though I don't do a lot of work in organizations these days, my research was around creating a safe place so people have a voice. So I'm also very interested in how do you create spaces for people so that they feel safe to be themselves. Yeah, and a
Yeah.
lot of my work is around parenting because I was a Montessori preschool teacher back in the day, um, and self-led parenting is one of my specialties. Birth to 6 is my favorite ages to talk about.
All right. Birth to six. Those are fun ages.
Yeah.
Ah, so for you, so self-led.
Mm.
So when you say that, what does it mean to you?
Yeah.
When do you know you have it? And when
Mhm.
do you know that others are living that lifestyle as well?
Okay. Well, first, I'd like to say when we're self-led, we have more choice in how to respond. So if something activates us and we lead from that activation and those parts are activated, we tend to be more blended. But when we pause and really listen to what's happening inside, and then I ask my parts, hey, is it okay to let me lead? And then I'm the one speaking. That's when we're self-led and we're responding maybe more from our heart, more from our center, more for the good of the both of us here sitting
Hmm.
together. And usually I can tell in my body when I'm not, because there's a lot of urgency, a lot of leaning forward, a lot of get this done. I need to have this happen now. And I sense that same thing in others too. Like you sense an agenda. And
Hmm.
oftentimes, I'm sure all the listeners know that when you sense that from other people, you might have a response. You might want to shut down. You might want to run away. You might want to fight back, or just kind of like not be that interested in what people are
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. And there's usually the beginning of conflict.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Usually, when people aren't self-led, it's like parts. We believe there are no bad parts, as Dick Schwartz says,
Hmm.
and they're trying to help. My parts are trying to help me, and your parts are trying to help you, and they might not really be listening to what I need when you're speaking, and my parts might not be listening to what you need, even if they're loving, but they're
Hmm.
loving because they want me to get what I need. And when we could get a little bit of space from those parts, all the loving things they want to say, I can say, and it lands on you differently than if they speak. So they kind of get what they want too. So I'm a big proponent of like I'm an advocate for my parts. Like my parts want my kids to be calm because then my body can relax
Hmm.
and I can have the end of my day be peaceful. But when those parts lead, they often will, like shut my kids down or say something that just gets them to do what I want them to do and it doesn't really land well. They don't feel connection. They might roll their eyes or close their door or isolate themselves. But when it's done for me, when I do that through connection and through my heart, then later I can look at those parts and go, hey, check it out. Like now they're regulated and I'm regulated. So you got what you want, but you let me do it. And it's good for both of us.
Yeah. And what do you see? So you've had a lot of years working with people. You've had a lot of years working with children. And what do you see is one of the most typical traits that parents maybe make that actually is a big impact for the kids, the child's system?
And and what kind of things they're doing in a positive way or a negative way or
So I would say it's the end of the day. You've had a tough work day. You have your parts are longing for the kids to maybe get along, don't fight, don't complain,
Mhm.
so that
All
you
right.
can have some peace. And what really gets traded right there in that moment.
Yeah. Excuse me, got a tickle in my throat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my mic's over there too. Um, I would say what happens in that moment is that the child will sense that they're not seen. They're often missed, misunderstood, often dominated, because I'm the authority coming in to tell you what to do. Um, and oftentimes you might get what you want, where you can get the children to be more quiet or stop fighting, whatever that's happening. But then you're both left with this kind of feeling of like, oh, that just doesn't feel good right now, right? Like it doesn't feel great for me to have to come in with a little heavy hand with the kids
Hmm.
or the kids. And when we think of children, we think, as parents, we're allowed to do this. We're allowed to say what we're say because we're given this right as a parent to have authority. But we would never talk to another adult that way. So I look at it like, how are we treating these humans with respect?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense because what I really hear is when the child is not feeling seen, not feeling heard, being misunderstood, there's a big trade happening inside of them.
Yes.
And my guess is it's for the child, it's starting to exile that self, that authentic self. And
Yeah.
so for to bring us full circle, if a child's doing that and learning that early on in life, what's that setting them up for as an adult?
Right. And, children, because they're the way they are developed cognitively at that point, the younger you are, like for infants, toddlers, I mean, very young infants, it's mostly a sensorial experience. But then, like, even through the preschool years, it's like very kind of concrete in my thinking. I'm not going to kind of abstract to think, oh, dad's having a really bad day. When he works with a lot of clients, he's not going to have as much patience with me. So this is dad's stuff, not mine.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to think there's something I did that's causing dad to look at me that way. It's not just the things we say, right? Dad's attitude, dad's kind of affect to me
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel like I'm lovable in this
Mm-hmm.
moment, right? I'm doing things that causes him discomfort. So am I lovable? Am I a bad person? So we're creating the seeds of shame.
Mm-hmm.
Like who I am is not a good person unless I can kind of act the way dad or mom wants me to act. Yeah, which is funny because most of us, if you ask, like Alfie Kahn's work on conditional parenting, he says like, most parents he interviews, they all want their kids to be like not following the herd and not just doing what people say, but to be innovators and creators and to like have their own minds and to think for themselves. But what happens when children don't listen to us and we shame them, or even by managing them, we're saying, you're not okay how you are now. You need to be something else to be accepted,
Mm-hmm.
which means they have to learn how to follow these rules of other people to be loved. So what does that do for later in life when other kids in high school are saying, hey, do you want to do this thing that that your belly tells you you don't want to do, but their same parts say, well, if I'm going to be loved, I need to do it, even if it doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah. And how crucial as you've been in this IFS journey, right?
Hmm.
How crucial is it for that integration of mind and body for parents to slow that down so that kids can understand what's happening here
Mm,
and listening and understanding what's happening in here?
yeah, very important. I think the more I do IFS, the more I realize I think like self energy for me lies way more in my heart than my head.
Mm,
And it's more of a sensation, like a sensing of knowing, where our brains have a lot of thoughts and words. And, sometimes I think like if it wasn't for our frontal lobe, we might actually have peace in the world, because we can create all this hatred for people and
mm-hmm,
othering other people. Our hearts aren't doing that. Our stomach aren't, our guts aren't doing that. Usually, you know, our hearts and our guts probably want more connection.
mm-hmm,
And so, but to take it not to be so abstract, I would think for children, you know, Like say I say something to a child, like, hey, you guys need to cut it out and stop
Hmm.
what you're doing. And I see their face drop. I might, if I had awareness and I could drop into self in that moment, and usually because kids are like a mirror, they tell me if they're reacting in a way that's negative like that, it tells me I was leading from a part. So it's
Hmm.
like a mirror for me to go, uh-oh, I must not be in self, because sometimes we're so blended we don't know.
Hmm.
And then I say, oh, I better check myself. And then if I get some space, I can say, what just happened for you when I said that? What happened in your body? Like I saw your shoulders went down. I
Hmm.
saw your head went down. You might have even felt something in your tummy just then. What just happened? And I think I just said something that hurt you
Hmm.
because I was feeling frustrated, and I might say I have a part that was leading, and I'm sorry. Now I'm here with you, and I'm realizing I hurt you when I said that.
Yeah. And how would you have this conversation with like a 1 to 3 year old as you notice that
Mhm.
maybe for them it's going to be more of a fear response is what I'm guessing there, like the "Ooh,"
I would
uh
just I'd be like a narrator, like, oh, I see something just happened to you in your body.
mm,
You're holding your body really tightly. You seem really upset. You seem scared. I might even say, wow, I think I just made a part of you scared.
yeah.
So just like when we point to a chair and say, let's go sit in the chair, or I'm going to put my food on the table. Children are gaining language within a context.
Hmm.
So when I say, oh, I think you just had a part, I think I just made a part of you scared. Or I just like, oh, now I see a part of you is angry.
Hmm.
Then I'm giving language to something. So as children grow up, they already have this language built in. And
Yeah.
we know that self doesn't feel fear.
Hmm.
So even a young child, there might be like, I can't say this for sure because, I'm not a psychologist, but I have a hunch that, yeah, there probably is some like natural reaction, like a fear, like an unconscious response. But you might start seeing some anxiety type of fear in
Hmm.
even a young child. And we know that would be a part because that would be
Yeah.
something that's not like an instant reaction, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So, um, I guess it's normalizing it. And, not just in my book, Self-Led, it's not, I just have one chapter on parenting. These other chapters are around how do we do this at work? So if I'm a leader at work,
Hmm.
by noticing the same thing in my staff, like when I come into a room and I'm having a bad day and I'm short, what are happening? How are people responding? And what happens when I'm more curious and I have more space in my body? And the key to this whole book, again, it's so self-led. We do parenting, we talk about work, we talk about intimate relationships, and even spirituality. Probably the general theme is that when there's parts activated in me, it makes you have parts that are activated. So parts beget parts.
Hmm.
So when I'm a boss and I walk into a room and I have like a bit of a threatening presence, people's protectors have to be up. So now we're in a meeting trying to solve a problem at work, and it's protectors against protectors talking, or it's even all managers speaking. And even managers have fear. Like if I don't say a good thing in front of Seth, I might get fired.
Hmm.
So that my hunch is when protectors are in the state of fear, we're acting more from our back of our brains, like our fight and flight type of
Hmm.
response. Like we need to make sure we're safe. It's just around safety.
Hmm.
But when our protectors relax, we actually have access to innovation and creativity to the more relaxed part. When we're relaxed, our creativity come forward.
Hmm.
So by being self-led at work, even if you're not a boss, if you're just a member of a team and you help people's protectors relax, people have more access to the best parts of themselves or their best selves. And the same thing with relationships, like how are, two people, how are we getting along? If I'm showing up more spacious and open, it allows your protectors to relax. And now we have more connection. Now we can solve the problem of the day. Um,
And
yeah.
right there, I'm curious for you. So I can imagine someone listening to this and having a childhood that let's say they didn't have caregivers who were as in tuned, who were speaking, landing, kids are scared, kids then go back here in the brain, right? They're going
Right.
safety, and what do I got to do? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawning, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so now you have adults who have this as their foundation, and
Hmm.
they're in leadership roles.
Right.
This is a tall glass.
Hmm.
Where do they begin?
Well, that's one reason why I wrote my book, is because I want to give a starting place. And
Mhm.
what I've noticed with my clients and other people, that when you start realizing this notion that it's not all of me that's hurt by my parents, it's not all of
Mm,
me that's hurt by whatever happened to me, that parts of me are hurt, but there's still like a light inside that might feel like it's gone.
mhm,
It's not gone. Self is still there, which means like my best authentic self, which in a state of flow where I could be like my most productive, my most creative, whatever that means for you, and everybody's a little bit different. That there is, it's still there. It might just be hidden. And so if I cognitively know that, now I can get curious, like, well, who is reacting in me? Who is affected by this trauma? And just by
mhm,
asking that question, that's why I got an IFS, because just by learning that, my anxiety dropped like 75%. I was going through a divorce and I thought, am I going to lose my kids? Even if I see my kids half the time, my life is going to be over.
mhm,
And when I realized that was a part of me that was feeling that way, I could still feel the grief of the loss of seeing them 100% of the time, but it wasn't this intense anxiety that I was feeling. So people can just by, so who's noticing, who's being curious, like
mhm,
who's like, wow, what's happening inside of me? A lot of times that is self, when especially once you practice this. And I want to tell people that this might seem daunting, like how do I even do this? It's very much like learning a new sport or learning an instrument. You
mhm,
just have to practice. And if you pause and just kind of in starting with the body, like what's happening in my body right now, like I'm feeling tense. What if I just focus on the tense feeling?
mhm,
And sometimes I'll even say, ask the tense feeling what's happening.
mm,
And you'll hear, like, I don't like this. This person's mean. I hate them. And so you're hearing a voice or you're feeling a sensation like that. And you can say back to that feeling or back to that voice, I hear you. This is scary for you, or you
mm,
don't like them right now. And I say, what I like to say to parts, instead of can you leave or can you step aside or step back, I like to say, can you give me just enough space so I'm here to, because I'm a very much attachment focused. Like I was raised in a home that there was very little attachment. And so like people think, you must have been raised by loving parents because you have all this, stuff to say about self energy, and you must be lucky. You must have been one of the lucky ones. Well, it's actually the opposite, that I've devoted my life to being like self-led, into also my parts. Their strategy is to keep my self energy because no one was there to give me the love and attention that I needed.
mhm,
So instead of exiling, for some reason, my parts said, let's protect this self energy and keep it strong. Um, but I devoted myself to early childhood education. And I remember thinking, even if I don't be a preschool teacher for life, at least I'll be a good father.
mm.
Like, so we can do things to combat what's happened to us.
Yeah. And before we close this one up, I'm curious because divorce is something that a lot of people experience. And we know a lot of times the children are the ones who really get caught in between the two energies of their parents.
Right.
And if you had language, or I know you have language, so have what is your how to become self-led when there's that adversarial energy
Mm,
between two parents?
right.
Where do they start for becoming more self-led? so that the courts aren't constantly like the lawyers are going back and
Mhm.
forth and the kids in the center of that
Yeah,
because that's a tough place for a child to be.
right,
So what have you seen around this? What's been your experience?
right,
And how, because it is a lot of protectors. It's one of the most protective
right,
times in people's
right,
lives.
right. Um, I would say that's a very challenging situation.
Mhm,
I would say, to be honest, my when I'm anywhere near my ex-wife, that's the hardest time for me to be self-led.
mm,
So what I've learned for myself is when I'm not self-led, at least be quiet. When before I'd be a little more adversarial. So
uh-huh,
now I'm just more quiet.
mhm,
Um, but luckily for my case, my ex-wife and I really valued raising children. Like,
mhm,
we have that in common. And so we didn't fight in front of them. But when say if there was a volatile situation like that,
mhm,
I would highly recommend that each person get their own individual IFS therapist to really get to know the parts of them that are really upset. Because
mhm,
really, like, when you're yelling at each other and there's like this high conflict and you're fighting in court and the kids are suffering and there's really not enough space in your own body to realize this is really hurting our kids.
mm,
Like this, because really this is all about me. I want it. I want the money. I want the kids. I want to hurt you.
mm,
And we're completely blind to what the kids need right now. So, and I don't know, in that kind of situation, maybe it would work to do couples work together, but I think you already know you're getting divorced. So why not
mhm,
just separate and
mhm,
do this work yourself? Because if you know your parts, you can still get what you need because your parts can tell you, I don't want to lose the kids. I don't want to be broke. Okay. Is it okay if I help with that? And maybe we don't need all the money. And maybe we don't need all the time.
mhm,
Like, let's, like, as self, I might turn as a counselor to my parts. Like, let's think about what the kids need right now.
mm.
Like, for instance, when my ex-wife shows up, I'll just be honest, I have parts that are just like, armor up, like, danger, danger,
Yeah.
red lights are flashing and all this kind of stuff. And I have enough self-energy that I was in a divorce when I was a kid, with my parents, and I would hear my mom's say, like, "Your father."
Mm,
Like, "Are you gonna go see your father?" And every time she said that, I would hear the despise for him, and it would make me wanna push my mom away, and it would hurt me. So I made a commitment that I never use the word "your mother." I just say "mom."
mm.
Even though this person is my, like, nemesis, my biggest trailhead, my biggest tormentor, that I
Yeah.
still need to do my own workaround, I'll
Yep.
admit it,
Mhm.
that when I'm talking to my kids, I say, "What did mom say?"
Mm,
Or like, "Oh, you going to mom, so you have to get ready to go to mom's." Now, if I were to say, "You have to go to your mother," it's almost like this, I'm telling you, I am separate from
mhm.
that thing over there.
Yeah.
So even like mom's house, dad's house, where's your house?
Mm,
Where do you live? So lots of things like that we had to kind of work through. And eventually the kids just used that language. So I followed it. But at the beginning, it was like the house and the condo.
mhm.
You're going to be at the house, you're going to be at the condo. Because even though we're not married, you still have the same parents.
Yep.
One parent lives in the condo, one lives in the house. So there's things people can do. But if you're feeling a lot of animosity, it really means is that person must be hitting some exile, some very tender thing deep in you that's causing you a lot of pain,
Mhm.
and your protectors are covering up the pain.
Yeah.
So if I lash out at you, I don't have to feel the deep loss and sorrow, or like you must think I'm a horrible person because you don't want to love me anymore. Like
Mm,
I must be unlovable because you're leaving me. So
yeah.
I'm going to lash out at you, and I don't have to feel that.
Mhm.
Cards are trying to help, even if they're violent. They're trying to keep us from feeling the shame of like not being a successful partner. Like this, I failed at this.
Yeah.
Like I've failed. You don't want to be with me anymore.
And what's really huge before we close it up is that, Seth really just hit on for the child, if it's your mom's, your father's, your mother's, what I heard you say without saying it is that's a lonely place for a child to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I could say, my daughter, who's actually on her way right now on a flight back home she's been in Spain for a year to come see me, but which is awesome. But she
Amazing.
had enough self-led energy or self-energy, and I must have had enough to give her that space that she told me that, Dad, even though you never talk bad about mom, the fact that you guys can't communicate has put me in this place where I have to be like this mediator where I have to talk to you, then I have to stay in conversation, and I have to like negotiate. And that's really hard to be in that space. And
Yeah.
it's always like I'm torn from one place to another. And I'm like, how did that happen? I tried so hard to be. But, there's going to be things that happen. And when we can listen to the kids, like what's happening for you, then we can actually make changes. And I would say I try to make changes like that.
Hmm.
It doesn't always work, but at least we can hear them and say, I can see how my actions and mom's actions created this situation for you. And I'm sorry that it's that hard.
Yeah. And what I really heard you say in this whole conversation is that ability for someone to pause, to
Mm-hmm.
look out, see what's being reflected back, and
Mm-hmm.
then come from a curious place of what's happening for you.
Right.
But at that first moment of what's the curious place, that's touching in and saying, well, what's happening for me?
Right. And that has to happen kind of before I can say what's happening for you. That's right.
Yes. Yeah. And it will move as people do it. I want them to hear this. The hope in this is
Hmm.
as you do this more, the neuro wiring, the pathway becomes that highway. And it goes so much faster than in the beginning when it feels clunky and new.
Yes, 100%. It becomes like a habit, a new way of thinking. I
Hmm.
had a therapist who one time said, like, we're in these cognitive grooves, a way of thinking, like it's like a luge. We just get in the chute and we shoo, and
Mm,
then by responding differently, we're creating new cognitive grooves. And I'm a woodworker, so I know it's really hard to get a saw to start, like a hand saw. Like you have to be really careful and persistent, just in one little kind of almost being gentle
hmm.
with the wood until it starts cutting in and creating a groove, and then you could really go. And then it becomes a new cognitive groove. But at first, like you said, it's like almost skipping around if you're not careful. It's not a habit. I'm so sorry about my cough.
You're okay.
um, so you're right, it becomes a new normal. And I can say for
Mhm.
myself, I even have manager parts who are on board that if somebody makes a grimace in front of me, all of my system pauses. Like all of my parts go pause, like they all yell at once, stop, because they know something bad's about to happen.
Hmm.
So even with you, like if I said something and you kind of like pulled back, or if you looked away, my parts would be like, check. And I would like see like who was just talking. Oh yeah, this or like the expert was just talking, or he was mansplaining, or something was
Hmm.
happening that created a reaction. Then I could say, hey, I could either just change in the moment, which I'll notice you'll soften again and come back to me,
Hmm.
or I could say, ooh, I might need to just own it. Like I just realized I was speaking from like an explainer part, or I talked over you or something, and I just saw a reaction. So I just want to ask you, did you have a reaction to me? Like, did I do something that just bothered you or hurt you? Because I sense I did. Um,
How big would that be for
yeah,
more people to do that?
right. And that's really what the book's about. Like, how do I do that in every area of my life? With my kids, with my partner, with my coworkers, my staff, my boss, even,
Hmm.
and in spirituality, like how do I know who's here while I'm engaging?
Hmm.
Is it manager parts that know you're supposed to pray or do a ritual a certain way? Like, is it a firefighter activity that I just need to feel soothed? So it's really like kind of getting to know. And then once we are in deep connection spiritually, we really get this full, not only our full self, but we get access to this larger self,
Mm,
into like maybe, some of your ancestors that have passed, or like my dad right now is like a guide for me. Like he comes to me, and when I hit especially a moral dilemma, I hear his voice, and he tells me, what's the right thing to do.
mm-hmm. Yeah. And even right there, I can only imagine the amount of comfort that is right there to hear your father's voice.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm gonna make one question. I'm curious. So
Hmm.
Amazon is where I bought my copy.
Okay.
Um, I'm also curious, are you ever going to do like a book club where you do a chapter or two chapters a month? If so, how can people get
Mm,
in contact with you? What's it look like?
yeah.
What, just
Question.
throwing that out there.
Um, I haven't thought of the book club. That's a smart idea.
Hmm.
Well, one thing I can say, if you go to my website, was basically my first name, last name.com, Seth Kopald, Kopald. You could buy the book from my website and I'll sign it and mail it to you. Or you can go to Amazon, or I think Barnes and Noble, and a few other smaller bookstores. Um, and I'm starting to do, because I'm a teacher and I've done presentations for like the last 30 years, like large conferences, small conferences, workshops. Um, I'm starting to offer workshops. So right now I'm offering one for trained IFS therapists and practitioners, but eventually I might actually do some for just folks who aren't IFS trained, who want to know how to live in a self-led way, which essentially would be very similar to a book club where we would talk about all these aspects. And if somebody ever wanted to do a book club and invite me, you can find my email on my website. I'm pretty casual and love to connect with people. So
Hmm.
just like this, like we're hanging out and talking, and
Yeah.
I would love if there was ever a group who was putting something together like that and they wanted to invite me. I would be happy to come and talk. Um, so yeah, how's that
Okay.
sound?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. I
Yeah,
appreciate you taking the time out to have this discussion.
yeah,
I have a lot of parts that are excited and appreciated. Just being grateful for this time and connection. So thank you so much.
yeah. And it's okay.
And oh,
One
go
last.
ahead. Yeah.
Um, I want people to know that, like, when I first found IFS, I thought the model was saying I had to do this and be lonely. Like I had to
Mm,
be there for myself, and I can't count on other people. And what I want people to know is, when we take the time, it might take a couple years of working with yourself, or being with yourself. I don't like to, I took all the words working with out of my book, and being with,
hmm.
um, that when I can be in connection with my parts and give them the love that they've always needed, the attention they've always needed, I feel like now I'm available to be in deep, authentic relationships with other people, because we need other people. We're wired for connection.
Hmm.
I want people to know that IFS is not just about being alone. It's like preparing myself so I can actually have authentic relationships with other people, and actually be helped by others, and to be loved by others, and to be able to accept help and to accept love. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that this is not a like an isolated, lonely, individualistic model.
Yeah, and I appreciate you slowing that down because I will say that working with clients, that tends to be one of the fears of if I do this, I will be alone.
Right.
So I appreciate you slowing that down so that people can get the language that it is truly a discovery process for them. And when they go through it and have that freedom and choice,
Mm,
that their ability to connect will be at a level that they have yet to connect at.
that's right.
And right there, that moment, when you have that, it's so hard to put words around the beauty of it.
Yeah.
To know that I'm not looking for you to make me whole,
Right.
that I'm whole myself, and I get to share that and be with you differently.
That's right. We get to be like whole beings together.
Hmm. Yes. And
Hmm.
that is just different.
Hmm. It is
Yeah.
different. It feels better, because when the other person is like my savior, or my missing piece, The
Mm-hmm.
minute they have a bad day, our life feels like it's falling apart.
Yes.
And when I'm whole, I want to say I'm going through some really tough stuff, and I'm hoping that you could sit with me
Mm,
and like I can almost feel your self energy, and I can hold your hand while I share what's happening for me.
yes.
And you can actually feel their support. And they might even give advice like that I could hear.
That's big right there.
In the past, I've always been like, "You can't help me. No one can help me." Why? Because no one ever was there for me. So I
Mm-hmm.
literally just in the last couple of weeks, like something else opened up into me where I could hear my wife, like, because I'm remarried, share things, and I was like, I could feel my system open to taking it in. Where before it was always kind of like a little bit of a, no, no one's able to help me. I need to figure this out myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's just enough healing to say, wow, I can accept help.
And that for people, when you get to that point in your journey, there will be some grief that accompanies.
Oh yes.
And
Yeah.
I just want to name the grief of it because there will be the knowing of, I didn't have that.
I didn't have it. Right. And grief is beautiful in a way. It sucks to feel it, but it's like this beautiful wave of like presence. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm finally letting myself feel what I need to feel instead of like pushing forward, swallowing it, creating dis-ease in my body. Right. Like I could like almost just flow on this on the swells of it. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm just getting there myself, and it's kind of it is beautiful to
It
feel
is.
the loss without my so I can hold all my little ones. I have these babies and 3-year olds, and as I'm holding them, they feel loved and accepted, and we can all experience the loss together. Like we didn't have this before, but we do have it now. But it would have been
Mm-hmm.
nice to be mothered or to feel like we had a mom or feel like
Yeah.
we had the way we needed it.
Mm-hmm.
Like even though I'm here, we could still be sad about that.
Yeah. And what's beautiful in that is that you're not exiling the experience. It's that ability to hold it and hold it differently, to say, yeah, that was extremely painful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it has really determined some of my past. And now I have choice.
Yes.
That
Choice.
choice is huge.
And that's circles back to what self-led is you have choice to how do I respond? How do I react?
Yes. Ah, Seth, thank you so much. This was such a fruitful conversation.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
really appreciate it. And I will put when I put this post on Facebook and LinkedIn and the other places, I'll be sure to put your website with them so people can connect with you, buy the book from you, get it autographed by you, and that way they have the connection, the bridge to Seth if they so choose to get curious
That
and
was so
discover with
awesome.
you. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking how lucky your clients are to spend time with you because this is really, really lovely and you have great energy and kindness. And so thank you for helping to create peace in the world.
Yeah, yeah, thank you too. Yes, thank you. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and stop now. Thank
Okay,
you, Seth.
you're welcome.